Welcome to the Expandable Mind podcast, where I speak to creators, entrepreneurs, and experts in their field about concepts and topics that not only intrigue me but adds a sense of purpose and value to everyday life. I'm your host, Vain Narka, and in this episode of the podcast, I speak to Jessica Silcock, where we will speak about her journey, self confidence, goal setting, imposter syndrome, and how different experiences can bring out the best of you. Here's a little bit of an overview of Jessica. Jessica is a communications and marketing executive at Crimson Education who has a passion for delivering customer-centric strategy within education and innovation sectors. Her areas of expertise include brand strategy, PR including issues, crisis communication, and internal communications, and much more. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. Looking back at your history, should I say, we look back at your childhood. What is it like? What is it like being should I say, the smaller version of yourself?
Great question, and thank you first off, Faheen, for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. Looking back, I don't know, over 30 years ago now, growing up, I had the mindset that you need to explore and you need to have an open mind to be able to, I guess, broaden your world because I was raised in a semi-rural town just outside of Melbourne, Australia. There wasn't a whole lot happening in terms of, entertainment and what was in front of me. It was up to me to really keep an open mind and to, I guess, be reverent when it comes to what was surrounding me. So, going to school, I was very excited to learn. I was always an avid reader, but I did feel quite anxious, almost in a debilitating way. I remember feeling a lot of separation anxiety from my folks, from my parents, and feeling like a very small fish in a big pond when it was time to go to school. So even though I could grasp the content in the class pretty quickly and was quite advanced in my studies, trying to understand this new system of where I fit in and how to have a voice in quite an intimidating new setting was a really steep learning curve for me. What gave me confidence, I think, always came down to feeling that I had ability in my studies, uh, feeling like I had plenty of friends. One challenge for me was not being able to please everyone, and I think I did have that people pleaser, personality in some ways that I had to try to outgrow or evolve from. A turning point came when in year four, I remember quite vividly, my teacher at the time turned to me and said, "Jessica, I notice that you pay, a lot of attention to those quieter people in the classroom, or the people that may have some special needs and aren't keeping up in the classroom." And she asked me to, I remember these words vividly, to be a guardian angel for these two students.
Mm.
And once she entrusted me to really look after the well-being of these two students, I took that to heart, and I really felt a sense of purpose in that moment to create a sense of community for them
Mm.
at school, and just to be a guiding light for them. And then I was lucky enough to be selected as school captain with two other students, two other boys,
Yeah.
and being in that role of school captain and then at the end of my final year of primary school, being awarded most outstanding student and winning a $500 scholarship at the time, that was the light turned on, and I thought, wow, I guess there is a chance here to be noticed and appreciated, and to make a positive contribution to my peers. And it was the pride in my mum's face and my dad when I heard my name announced at the time at graduation. That was a real driver for me to keep keep going and try to make them proud, and to, I guess, understand and discover in myself what I was capable of, coming from a very anxious and shy frame of mind to begin with.
Yeah, and that's amazing. Would you? So, I think like the earlier days of your childhood. So when you started school and so forth, would you say that going to school was a tedious process? You're like, okay, must I really go to school? Do I have to go to school? Like, I think like it still relates to a lot of teenagers, even children that are in primary school. They I don't think they it's a tedious process, especially when they haven't found like that passion that they want to
Hmm.
go to school. Oh, I found maths as an interesting subject, as a I think like many people disagree on with me, and unfortunately I'm one of those few people that find maths very entertaining. I can sit for hours doing it, but some find it a very tedious process. So how did you actually like when was that change for you, when you changed from, oh, school is this really tedious process, getting up in the morning is like, oh, to, okay, was it that time where helping those students was like, okay, yes, I have a purpose now and so forth?
Hmm.
What do you recommend to children or teenagers or even people out there in the workplace in terms of finding their purpose? What can they actually like ask themselves? Am I happy? Or what type of sort of question line can they ask themselves to find their purpose?
For me, I felt that I put a lot of pressure on myself to begin with. And once my dad gave me some really interesting advice. He said, don't aim too high, actually. He said, if you aim low enough, you'll be content with whatever the outcome. And he only said that to me, I think, because he saw that there was that intrinsic motivation and also pressure that I was placing on myself from a young age to be the best I could possibly be a model student, and make everyone happy. Don't disappoint anyone. So he gave me permission to just explore and take the pressure off. And that left room for me to fall in love with literature and English. And I guess we'll talk later about the career path I took following that storytelling passion that I have. But for me, my sense of purpose, I feel, was discovering that I could create a sense of belonging for myself and togetherness by being the person that everyone went to for advice and help with English. So one of my nicknames in primary school was the dictionary. Just ask the dictionary over there, and we'll get help. So being able to make a contribution, be helpful, be called on by someone of authority who I thought was the expert, the teacher, that gave me a real sense of pride of place. I think this day and age, what we see in young children through middle school, high school can be isolation and loneliness. And often they may feel that going to school, or they're nervous because they don't really belong, or they might not know their place there, or whether they are good at anything and lack that confidence. But if there is an area where they can feel that they are passionate about and they can talk to it, lend advice, or take on that role of being an expert, I think that gives a lot of confidence and a feeling of community and a bond that can last for a long time.
And yeah, that I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when it comes like in terms of finding purpose at a school level, where you still finding your feet, trying to find who you are. Like I don't think anybody in high school, if you have found who you are, you're a perfect genius. But I'm still trying to find who I am as a person, and we're all trying to grow every single day.
Hmm.
We're trying to learn new things, and I think like where you brought it up, like your parents have always been a support in your journey, and from the sounds of it, and they've always strived you to work hard and so forth. Like when it came to like your school career, like did you have like always, were they the ones, the motivating factor behind, okay, you must get like, let's get those high grades, I must get those high grades, and then when you're outside school, okay, let's get a job, or maybe like work even harder, like have
Mm.
maybe um go to the library and volunteer there? Were they part of that journey?
It comes from a couple of different influences when I reflect on that. I grew up, my parents had pretty modest financial means. So my dad was a builder and bricklayer, and actually came from Italy, migrated to Australia. So didn't have a network or professional support really available to him at all. Had to learn another language while in school, and overcame all those obstacles to end up building homes and then being a courier driver, so driving a truck. And then in my mum's case, after working as a secretary in the city for some time, her focus turned to raising two children, myself and my older sister, and then working quite casually in a bakery. So they didn't have access really to a whole lot of academic resources, or um, they didn't understand, I suppose, what was available to really bolster and boost our academic performance or career pathways so much. I think knowing that and sensing that from a young age, I figured out that I would have to work really hard as a migrant family, um, to establish these connections and these pathways really from scratch. So that was one factor in the back of my mind. Another factor was my grandparents, who were Italian. In broken English, they would basically ask me every time I saw them, "Are you working hard? Are you earning money? Do you have a job?" There weren't any other questions on the list other than, "Tell me, are you working hard? Do you have a job?" Once they heard that I was school captain, the nickname became captain, and it was a really um, work ethic focused environment that was created around me. And then looking to my older sister, as the younger sister often does, that gave me a competitive drive. So I would look to my big sister, and as an example, benchmark how I needed to perform. So she was a straight A student. She was on a pathway to becoming a lawyer. So I thought to myself, I need to top that naturally. I need to really surprise the family, um, and maybe start to shift this label that my sister was the academic one and I was the sociable one. So I really worked hard, um, to prove to myself and the family that I had what it takes to, and also to let them know that they did a great job as parents. We were surrounded by love, plenty, really encouraged to have curiosity, to have an open mind, and to be kind, considerate, across the community. So with all that, I wanted to show them that it was able to create someone with confidence who could contribute back to society and to lead a fulfilling life beyond school. So yeah, I got a pretty good final ATAR score, and was named valedictorian at the end of high school. And with that, I basically had free reign of whichever degree I wanted to study come university. I didn't want to follow in my sister's footsteps completely and do law, even though I was considering law. So instead, I enrolled in RMIT's very popular professional communication course, which I majored in strategic public relations and advanced journalism, print journalism, and that opened up a whole new world for me at
Yes.
that point.
Yeah, and that's great. Valedictorian, and I'm sure a lot of people out there and a lot of teenagers really want that title. And this coming on that, I from the research and so forth, you were involved in community-based leadership and initiatives while in high school. What sort of initiatives were those? Can you give us a few examples if you can remember?
Hmm. I remember always wanting to put my hand up to support in the education context. So one example was, there was a group of refugees, Sudanese refugees, who migrated to Australia. This was in the 2000s, and one opportunity was to actually volunteer tutoring in English and mathematics to these students. So that was really rewarding, and that was probably the first opportunity I had to volunteer in the education context. I loved that, and that was from an initiative that our social captain, who I'm still very good friends with today, launched while in high school. Um, Another opportunity
Yeah.
that I then followed at university was volunteering, a lot of volunteering actually, to get experience and to develop my skills, but to also get a sense of my place in the world as an adult. Where did I fit in? I put my hand up to be a life historian,
Yeah.
it was called, for an aged care home, so an extended care facility. My job was to sit down with patients who I would, consider my clients, and slowly interview them over a series of visits, some suffering from dementia, Alzheimer's, and learn to piece together the fragmented memories that they had of their life. And the really fulfilling part for me was listening over these tape recordings, uh, writing up the life story, and then being able to hand a copy of that to the family. The family would read that, and in one case, there was a patient whose sons learnt a whole new chapter of their mum's life that they didn't know existed before. She wasn't comfortable really sharing until this moment of her life. That was phenomenal. And that was, yeah, a very rewarding experience that also helped to hone my interviewing and writing skills at the same time.
The initiative that you took there was amazing. I think if more people could do that, would you recommend to students out there, when they trying to find their passion? I'm not saying they found their passion, but when they're trying to find their passion, um, do you recommend that they engage in these sorts of activities? And how would they, like, where would they approach? Like, not all schools, like, I know for my school, for example, they are a leadership based school.
Mm,
We have leadership principles and so forth. But for those schools that are not, and wherever this is in the world, like, where does one actually find them? How do they approach people? Oh, can I volunteer here? Because approaching people in today's world, it's not as easy as it thinks. Like, this podcast, like, approaching people is like, I had to learn how to, like, talk and so forth, because it's not easy. It's like talking to people that are higher grade than me. I'm like, oh damn, I don't actually know these people. I'm
mhm.
nowhere near their qualifications. So where can they bolster their confidence, and what resources can you advise to them?
Yeah, absolutely. Bolstering confidence, I think it just comes from trial and error and experiences. And only you know your experiences, and only you see life through a very individual lens. So you can have confidence in knowing that you bring a very unique perspective thanks to all your upbringing, your background, your education, your teachers, exposure to all these different elements of your life. You create then and bring a very individual and unique perspective to the world around you and what you can contribute to society. So take confidence in that first off. I think choosing an area to volunteer in can be led by what gives you energy. When I feel a little, um, when I lack momentum or I feel a little discouraged, I often think to myself, well, let's go back to what gives me energy, what excites me, where do I feel like I'm doing great work? And what we call at Crimson is the flow. When do I get into a flow? And that state of mind and flow is basically when you're doing an activity and time stands still. And for you, Vahin, that most likely is working with numbers and mathematics and solving certain problems and in physics and so on. You
Yeah.
can do it for hours and time stops. You can lose track. You lift your head up and all of a sudden it's approaching midnight, and maybe you forgot to drink water in the last few hours or forgot to eat because you've been so absorbed in what you were doing and you're creating something. And that's a beautiful process to go through. So
Mm.
channeling that into volunteering is great. If there's an organization that exists that welcomes like-minded people who are passionate about STEM or art or writing or literature, think about approaching that program. Another one would be looking at other students' extracurricular activities and putting your hand up to join the team. For example, at Crimson, we have what we call is the ECL platform,
Mm.
extracurricular platform. Well, it wouldn't be as intimidating as an
Yes.
institutional, corporate establishment, perhaps. So if there's other high school students running competitions, either participate and put your hat in the ring
Mm.
and maybe enter the competition if it's run by other high schoolers, or you could volunteer helping run it. So perhaps this podcast channel, over time, someone can put their hand up and help you produce this, or find talent, source talent, or brief talent to be on this podcast, for example, or support the promotion of the podcast, be it across social media, learning more about that, or storytelling of the guests that are on this podcast. There are so many avenues you can go down. And one final piece of advice I'd love to give, because I myself am the director of this program, is the Crimson Youth Fund. So, through the Crimson Youth Fund, if a student listening here, a parent, if you've come across an idea that maybe doesn't exist and you think, I'd love to volunteer, if for this kind of thing, or I'd love to attract volunteers behind this kind of organisation or cause, apply to the Crimson Youth Fund. So just Google
Yes.
Crimson Youth Fund. When you do apply, myself and a panel will review your submission and we'll agree to either monetarily support you or through advice and mentorship in other ways, give you an idea of how you can establish a really great community impact project, which is really a form of volunteering. Or you can get involved in other existing Crimson Youth Fund backed initiatives. So that's another channel that's available globally for anyone between 13 and 18 years old, or 21 years old, I should say, 13 to 21.
Yeah, and I can personally say that the Crimson Youth Fund has helped me. I approached the Crimson Youth Fund. I was like, okay, what is this all about? I actually want to start a podcast, but how? Like the podcasts are not like cheap to start either. Yes, you can start. You can have like a few free versions and so forth. But then I was like, I want to take this actually like a uh, proper job, if you could say that, a full time thing. And yeah, I think like eventually we might grow. I might grow the podcast team. There's only one person for now, which is me, but I'll maybe look back to this podcast and probably think, oh, damn, thanks Crimson Youth Fund, and thanks Jessica for the support. Yeah, maybe volunteers, or maybe in the next few months, maybe in the next few years, we could have like actually a paid team and so forth. And yeah, it wouldn't.
I'll also add to that, Vahid, if I can, you've just reminded me that the approach that you took, which is really impressive, you mentioned, you don't feel that you're at the same grade, perhaps, or you might not have the same life experiences as the quote, experts that you have on the show. But what I've learned over time is it's not about having the right answers. It's about asking intelligent questions. So don't consume yourself too much in having to know what the answer is or the right answer, because there is always a gray area and a way to interpret that, justify that.
Mhm.
Um, I think if you really understand the right questions to ask, open questions that dig a little deeper, that will allow you to really evolve a lot quicker and to learn a lot quicker. So the right questions and also a diversity of people that you're consulting and asking gives you a nice broad perspective.
Yeah, and I think, well, I think I'm achieving that. Hopefully, I've had him and Dr. Tom Crawford in previous episodes. If you go check that out, and as well as
Mm.
Tyler Shaw's, that was my first podcast episode. It was like, yes, for me personally, and if I reflect back to the time, yes, I was very nervous in comparison to me right now. When I look at your life experiences and from previous chats that we had and so forth, I remember that you told me about the 2008 and how you just finished getting your first degree.
Oh, yes.
Jobs weren't just like openly handed out. Companies were in like some were all in financial struggle. What did you do in that? Yeah.
In my last year at uni, actually, pretty much every year of university, I volunteered and did internships for free. And that was for me, I saw that as a chance to work on my character building, my confidence, and to gain skills so I become a valuable employee in the future. So I didn't focus too much on these skills-based internships paying me. I also had to work to earn a salary, and I wanted to start saving up because I did come from a family that was, frugal background and always taught me to save up. So I was balancing, yeah, working in retail, also doing internships, and then study around that. The GFC, before the GFC hit, I was in my final year of university, 2008, and I was offered to actually work within a PR agency that I had a lot of fun working with. And I, at the time, declined because I was so focused on finishing my degree and not pausing on the degree. I'd have to pause on my studies. I was so focused on ticking that goal and graduating and diving straight into the workforce full time. So I passed on that offer, and then basically I graduated, and it was time to start looking for open roles, and it was very, very dry. The first departments to basically go in terms of investing in resources were often your marketing, your public relations, advertising, communications departments. So it was very challenging. I wanted to keep feeling productive. I often find I'm most anxious or hard on myself when I don't have a lot of work to do. And that's something I need to work on and to find fulfillment and balance in other areas. But for me, my sense of purpose and confidence often came from contributing and working hard and feeling like I was doing a good job. So I went back to thinking about volunteering. I started to
Mhm.
finally take up some contract work. So it was bit by bit. Once I was able to get my foot in the door with a 3-month contract, a government role where I was a communications advisor, that was a great experience. I actually was able to support communication around employment for people with disabilities. So I ran an event around this, raising awareness around employment for people with disabilities, this agency, Wise Employment, and we were able to, at the time, secure a very impressive government minister as a spokesperson. And I was the project owner of that. So
Yeah.
that taught me a lot around media relations and so on, public
Yeah.
speaking, event management, and for a really good cause. I then, from that, had a shoe into full time, ongoing, indefinite employment, and that was for a celebrity chef in Melbourne, Guy Grossi, that was working as his PR assistant and personal assistant. And that felt like that took me around the world, definitely around Australia in many ways, in terms of the advising and the media and the events and the celebrity that came with that and the publicity around that. So that was a phenomenal training ground. I was, I think, 21 at the time, learnt so much, um, and graduated from that role in many ways. After about 2 years, decided to take a break and reevaluate what I learned, what I was enjoying about working full time. Um, at that time, I was working pretty much 12-hour days, and at times it was beyond 5 days a week. So it'd be 8 till 8, but that meant I'd leave home before 7 a.m. Because I lived in this semi rural suburb that was a little while to get into the city. So I did have to decompress and think about, am I on the right path? Am I still going to pursue ultimately public relations, communication, media? So I was able to, um, once I felt that there was more stability and security in the world's economy picking back up, 2010, 2011, I then went on my first overseas trip with my sister across Europe for a couple of months. That was 2011. And from there, um, I came back after
Mm.
2 months of being able to travel and doing my first
Yeah.
overseas trip. And I applied for a role at Kumon, which is a global tutoring company in English and maths. And from the role of media coordinator, where I was given the very exciting task of going around Australia and New Zealand and interviewing. I think my KPIs, my goals were interview 40 people within your first month, basically. Come back to me when you've interviewed 100 people. Um, that taught me a lot about customer empathy around what a brand truly is when you speak to the students and families doing the program, learning from Kumon, the Kumon method. I really enjoyed that role and was then promoted to lead the whole marketing public relations aspect of Kumon ANZ from Sydney. That was a big change for me, leaving home and moving to a new city. I was 24 at the time, turning 25, and was a fantastic, I think, almost 2 years in that role. Before I then decided to change again, challenge myself in another environment. So after um, jumping from what was, I guess, described as a corporate environment and multinational, I was able to often travel across Asia in that role. So that we would have strategic meetings. I was fortunate to work, within Jakarta, within Manila, within Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Tokyo. It took me everywhere, uh, working with other teams on these offsites. I then came back and thought, well, I've never worked within government before. Let's try that. So just before joining Crimson Education, I worked at the Australian synchrotron for those physics fans, students, and the particle accelerator. And I was there for only 6 months. It wasn't for me. I found working within this kind of environment and the way decision making happened, it seemed quite slow to me, just compared to what I was used to. So I then thought it was a natural progression to work within a startup at the time. Crimson is now very much established and no longer what we would call a startup, but it was, yeah, super entrepreneurial environment. And that was such a change from government, from corporate to go into Crimson as a quite an early employee. And I'm very proud to still be there now. Next week, it'll be, I think, 6 years since then.
Amazing. Amazing. And I think like from all your experiences, all your work experiences and so forth, from the celebrity chef to working at Kumon to the synchrotron to well, Crimson. I think like at the moment it looks like you Crimson is like really, you're really enjoying it there and so forth. And well, who wouldn't? Crimson is like really great from everybody's opinions and so forth. But I think you understand the concept of self-respect. That yes, for example, the celebrity chef, you were this, you just like, okay, I need to take a step back. Let me reflect.
Hmm.
I'm working these 12-hour crazy days. I'm number one, not getting enough, probably not enough sleep. I'm not getting enough personal time. I'm not being able to communicate with my family enough. And then when you went to Kumon, I think like I think the traveling got to you quite a bit from hearing your experience. Like you were traveling quite a lot, like managing family and traveling. It's not an easy thing because you can't take your family on every trip that you go. Like okay, like what happens then? Um, and then the synchrotron, like you knew, okay, immediately 6 months in, okay,
Hmm.
that is not for
Hmm.
me. I'm done. And that just speaks about like your self-respect. And what is your understanding of self-respect?
Mm, that's a great question. For me, it's understanding at the end of the day, uh, back to my energy levels and my drive. And if I wake up and naturally, I've always been what people have described as happy-go-lucky. So my default is to take a pretty positive view of the world and of people. And it yeah, it takes a lot, I guess, to shift my mindset from um, that natural state of being quite motivated and positive. But um, I can recognize in myself the pattern when I'm moving away from that. Um, yeah, basically feeling foggy, not being able to make decisions confidently, maybe starting to second guess myself, or um, feeling a little more doubtful, overthinking things, spiraling into that kind of reevaluating how I performed. When I'm in that state of thinking, I know that it's time to step back, and give myself space to just find that confident voice again. And that's when I made the assessment that, I have been working really hard. I felt that I'd done a really good job and I wouldn't disappoint anyone. If I was going to move on, I'd leave the team, my boss, the company in a better state than how I maybe came. So I was pleased with that. If I'd felt that I'd given it my all, if I'd made contributions that would improve the way things were being done, uh, and if I'd basically got into my limit of energy levels, then I was satisfied to say, okay, that chapter is done now. And I want to keep learning and exploring. And I feel that when you have an area of talent, what some people might say a gift, if you feel that you've got a gift in some area, it is your duty in some ways to share it and to see where else you can contribute it, or where can you make an even bigger impact. So I was always looking at that. Where can I make a further impact? For me, it wasn't about feeling that I deserved a different title or a different salary, or you know, for me, it was more about feeling like where can I keep growing and contributing next, and where am I going to get my next life lesson from? Um, just building wisdom for me is like the most invaluable currency there is. So that's what I've always used as my guiding principles, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's amazing. I think like in today's world, everybody's so busy looking at it, looking at the status because and if I think this is an influence on
Mm-hmm.
family and so forth. Oh,
Right.
this person here is so busy. They got
Busy,
to,
right?
yeah,
Being
they
busy is
got
so
like
glamorized.
exactly. They got this whole life, and you're looking at it through like maybe a lens, and life is like so multi-dimensional, and you're just seeing
Right.
one dimension of their life.
Exactly.
Nobody actually understands what a life is. Who, everybody else's life, and that's the truth. So I can't actually be the one like just looking at you. Yeah, like it's easy to judge and say that, oh, this person got this, and I think that this is where the concept of self-respect is actually like lowered because everybody's looking through this lens that
Mm-hmm.
you as a person, oh, they got this, they got a Mercedes Benz, or they got a big fancy house, or they got this here and
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and they're looking at that and they want to work more longer hours and less sleep. And in the at the end of the day, like there's this phrase that i- your wealth is not your health, but your health is your wealth. And that phrase actually like comes on to in relationship with self-respect. And I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
agree with me at that whole point, but
100%. Yeah. I recently read a book that I would highly recommend to those listening. Um, and it's on the topic of wealth, but it comes from a psychological kind of perspective. It's called The Psychology of Money: Timeless Lessons on Wealth, Greed, and Happiness by Morgan Housel. It's a phenomenal book, and he talks about there's a chapter on the difference between rich and wealth, rich people who are rich and people who are wealthy. And I'm paraphrasing here, might not have it correct, but he talks about you see rich, like you said, in the Mercedes and in this size house and these brands that you choose to see, but you don't see wealth. Wealth is what accrues over time behind the scenes, and it's not often spent on these status, symbols so much. So you can't really judge people on the surface around that. And the book also talks about when is it enough. So being happy with enough, and just trying to think why are you seeking to show these things, or why are you seeking a certain amount of fortune? Where does that come from? So just I think always having a conversation with yourself on who is it for, and will it make you feel any more fulfilled and secure, and excited about life? I think there's some good questions to ask yourself.
yeah, I've also read The Psychology of Money. Amazing book.
Great. I thought I saw you nodding.
Yeah, it's a great book. I'd recommend the audience read it. uh yeah, if maybe we get the author on the podcast, maybe, and we can speak about that. But I think the ultimate, when you know that you've understood your self-respect and self-worth as well, is when you know when it's enough is enough. And I think, Jessica,
Mhm.
you've like mastered that. You've mastered it from like your early work experiences. Like, okay, I've had enough of this, because number one,
Mhm.
it's I'm not you understood that I'm not chasing it for the money, but and status,
Mhm.
and people chase jobs for that. Um, I'm not going to say that
Mhm.
if everybody can be perfect, we all have some sort of
Mhm.
psychological. Okay, we have our psychological personalities. We're driven and so forth, but there's also a limit. You have to
Mm.
understand when do you put the brakes on, and that just defines
Right.
respect.
Right. One thing that's right. At times, when I took on a lot of responsibility, so at Crimson, before my current role of, community director, global community director, I was the head of marketing, public relations, and communications globally. So the SVP at Crimson and on the executive team. And for me, what was hard was at times knowing when I could say no, or to draw some lines when I felt responsible for my team. actually, sometimes it's not even about yourself, but you think, this is, I'm being of service to others. And my way of being of service to others and lifting others up is giving as much from my bucket as I can. And what I was taught over time is, and this is from becoming a mother, which has been the biggest blessing for me. Becoming a mum, having a daughter, a little girl. What that taught me was, in order to be a great mum, you actually need to fill your own bucket up first to be able to then give from that bucket to others. So, having that self respect and refilling your cup and energizing yourself, it's not selfish. Saying no is not selfish. It actually allows you to say yes to the things that really matter and that make an impact, and to bring your best self to those projects or to those people, in my case, my daughter. So having her has made me feel a lot better about saying no to other things, because I know in every time I say no, it's a yes to my family. So, and that's become a big part of my purpose and my focus and priority in life. So, your baby might be a project, it might be founding a company, and in your case, Vahin, for the expandable mind, when you say no to other things, it comes back to reflect on, what does this allow me to do in growing the expandable mind? So it's great to have um, those measures that matter to you. If that project, that baby, if you will, keeps giving you energy and a sense of purpose and joy and fulfillment.
Yeah, and actually saying no, I'm actually one of those people that okay, I'll do it. Whether
Right.
and it's something that I'm trying to also like learn slowly. I do say no to a few things. Like if somebody tells me, okay, let's just give an example. My sister tells me go fetch this from. I'm like, no. Previously, I would have like, okay, yes, I would. I'll
Yeah.
bring it down.
Hmm.
and and that's
Right.
totally changed me. You have your daughter, for example, that you children learn through your actions and not your words.
Right.
That's what psychology is. It states out
Right.
there that children are influenced. If you say no, if they understand when to say no to certain things, like I'm sure that sometimes they'll just like, no, I don't want to do this, and it's fair
Yeah.
enough to say, okay, there's certain things that yes you have to do, but especially, and you can
Mm-mm.
enforce as a parent, but for some things, like okay, you just like just okay, we understand that you don't want to do it, and I think that parents out there need to understand that children also have some sort of self-respect. It's not only in the working world that okay,
Right.
understanding when to say no and so forth, but also like
Exactly.
just general house chores. Like okay, I don't want to do this. No, I don't want to do this. Maybe it's a bad example, maybe I'm saying something wrng, but maybe I'm saying it to
Well,
the wrong people, but
one
I,
tip I can give you on that is, I think absolutely, be self-awareness is such a powerful tool. The more self-aware you are, I think the more confident you can go into a conversation. And I use the word conversation because with my daughter, who's just turned 2, what I'm figuring out is, rather than just teaching her to say no, which is an important life lesson, I think it's the negotiation that goes into the conversation. That's a real skill. So when it comes to saying no to chores, um, over time, you can use that as an exercise to practice your negotiation skills, because in business, in life, it all you can negotiate on pretty much anything. And that's something I didn't learn. I think growing up, I was more observing what I saw among my family, which was respect authority, say yes, do what you're told, um, and follow the experts. And where I see students thriving in high school and later in life is them having skills to negotiate, back themselves, and do it respectfully, and do it sensibly, and you know, but do it with an open mind, and as an activity to, I suppose, be your biggest advocate.
yes, and I think a big part of leadership is understanding negotiation skills. So, yeah, and
Absolutely.
I think I want to speak a little bit more before we head into Crimson. I think my favorite part and the part I'm waiting to hear more about. I just wanted to hear you traveled. quite a bit
Right.
from what your experiences and what I've heard so far. But your Kumon, when you were working at Kumon, Australia, New Zealand, and so forth. Okay, I'm proud to say that I'm a Kumon English completer. So yay, 1 point
Well
on my
done.
side. Uh, but
Absolutely.
the common program does, yes, it does help a lot, like in terms of English. Yes, your
Mm,
vocabulary is going to be brilliant, especially after reading, I think, like level I or something like that, Shakespeare, and you
mhm.
understand certain things like that.
Macbeth.
But yes, Macbeth. I think that's where I think I also came across Julius Caesar, my favorite out of
Yes.
all of
Right.
the Shakespeare's works. Julius Caesar. To all those Romeo and Juliets, those star-crossed lovers out there, not my favorite, but don't mind me because of that. But that's my opinion. Everybody's entitled to opinion. What is it? How did you actually balance between your family, managing time with your family and so forth,
Hmm.
like your mom and dad? How did you balance between this all this traveling? And I think I've like raised it previously, like you said, I think that got to a point. How did you
Mm,
say, okay, how did you balance it at the initial start? Like, okay, it must have been exciting at the start,
hmm.
uh, traveling and so forth, being given this opportunity, especially
Yeah.
now that you look back and you reflect that, okay, COVID's actually taken away travel for a bit. Um,
Right, right. I do
so
miss it. I absolutely miss it. I found that when I was in the sky flying, sometimes on an 8-hour flight, other times it was an 18-hour trip because I'd be going from Melbourne to San Francisco, um, which I don't miss so much, that part. But I found that I'd always have a bird's eye. It granted me literally, a bird's eye view of work. I was removed somewhat. I knew I had just me time, and I had my laptop and my books and my notepad, and I could really strategically think about where I wanted the team to get to, where I saw opportunities that were untapped, where I wanted to develop myself, how I would approach this next business meeting or this conversation. So I missed that space that it gave me, the headspace to really pause, because I knew I was free from distractions, and in a way I was given permission to not be accessible, um, which is the challenge when you're in a global organization. You feel like you can always be reached, but on the flip side, the wonderful thing is that you can reach out to anyone. And just today, for example, I've had conversations with someone in the Midwest of America, people in New Zealand, someone in Korea, and someone in Colorado before talking to you in South Africa. So it's a great day so far from my cozy house in Melbourne, Australia. But back to how to balance family and other personal commitments while you are working in other countries and cities and time zones. For me, the answer was bringing them into my world. So rather than saying, you won't hear from me for a few days, I've just got this work thing, I'll speak to you when I get back. Uh, I wanted to fill them in on how I was going and what I was learning, what I was experiencing. So for me, it was letting them know, when my plane's about to take off, give them a call, let them know how I'm feeling. When there, let them know I've landed. This is what I've got as my schedule the next day. So just keeping them informed, almost like a support team. I think people often say that, at work, you've got your team and you've got your mentor or your manager, and that's your support. Actually, you really, for resilience sake, you need to broaden out your support network to also include other relationships outside of the work environment and the office. That gives you strength, and it reminds you of who you are, um, what your principles are, and it helps you to have confidential conversations with people that you might not um, be able to share information with at work. So just having them as my support team while I'm on these work trips, sharing in with them the funny moments. I know back in our last call we spoke about cultural differences and um, you know different words used to describe different food. So laughing about those moments with family and friends is always a great thing, and then coming back and just having a few fun stories to share. I think that helps them to see that you're not sacrificing too much, that you're getting a lot out of it, and you're bringing some insights back to the table as well to have a good conversation about. Another piece of advice I would give to anyone listening to this who is a student or a young person is to try talking about your feelings as well. Um, I know it can often feel uncomfortable. It's so personal. Sometimes it can feel taboo in some families, but the more you can talk about your feelings, I'm feeling like I would, say, I didn't realize I was a nervous flyer, but I'm feeling a little anxious packing for this trip, or I'm really looking forward to this, but this person kind of intimidates me. So let's see how this goes. And if you've got any advice on this, knowing that I could talk about how I was feeling, not just having to put on a brave face or to talk just about the business of work and all those other factors that impact the way you um, get energy and how you get up in the next morning. I think that's important to create space for you to talk about those things too, how you're feeling along the way. That means they can also spot some red flags, I think. So if they're in the habit of saying, "Well, how are you feeling today?" and if your response comes back and there's a clue that something's a little different, they might be able to point that out to you before you might even realize. They might say, "You seem a little tired. Are you sure you're okay?" Or "You don't seem to be eating like your usual routine. Is there something on your mind?" I think it helps for your parents to be able to have these conversations and spot these things, or your friends and family, if they're clued into the full picture of what working and traveling and being away from home looks like.
No, that's really great. I remember when I think grade five or somewhere like that. I went to New York by myself with like schoolmates and so forth,
Mm,
and it was a brilliant experience. Like taught me a lot, especially going by myself. It was I didn't have
absolutely.
no family with me. Probably like friends that probably I could like count on. I still keep in touch with like one or two of them, but
Mm,
it I was broadened by that. My mind was broadened. The experiences brought a lot to me. And I think like hearing your experience that you've diversified your network totally.
mm-hmm.
You've met so many people around the world that you can go to a country and probably like, okay, hi, you meet them somewhere.
Yeah,
Like, it's
it's a
not
great
not
feeling.
rare, but you could say that diversifying your network is like I think in the
Right.
world today, especially as we are the gig economy or the sharing economy, as I read in a book. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's so important. But how does one actually network? I only joined
Mm.
LinkedIn recently, and I was like, oh,
Yes.
LinkedIn's actually better than. Well, I just don't have the gist of Instagram. So to be very honest, I'm a very bad Instagram user. I don't know how to use it fully. That's my
Yes.
total honesty. But LinkedIn has I communicate with like people from different podcasts, and that's amazing. I've joined groups on there. It's like just so. And I'd recommend to the audience like join LinkedIn, like join groups, speak to people on there. Like people have such different
Mm.
experiences, and it would be so good to
Yes.
just hear those experiences, and then you can apply it. I'm just talking to you, for example. I've learned so much about saying no, self-respect, and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. And it's just like I do wish that maybe more people can understand like traveling and so forth. But
Right.
I
Yes. Let's dive into that. We can dive into some of that. Um,
yeah,
One more tip on the self-respect is communicating as openly as you can. I'll just finish with that part. When it comes to saying no, I always like to try to offer some other value at the table. Like, while I'm saying no to this today, um, perhaps in 2 weeks from now, or what I can offer you is this great person, or my advice for what you can do next, so I'm not that roadblock is this. So I always try to deliver my no with a helpful suggestion or some value add where they can still take next steps and not be roadblocked. But onto the global community aspect and networking, how to network. So I get asked this question a lot, and networking, I think, is wrongfully given a very formal label. It's almost as if it's another task on the on the list of what to do while at university, while at work, and now while in high school is the expectation, which is adding some pressure to people. So How I see mentorship and networking within the similar camp is relationships, friendships. If you see it as a friendship or a relationship that you're developing, I think naturally the rapport, the collaboration, the sharing of ideas follows. So, how I approach it is um, firstly reaching out to someone who I admire or that has been in my kind of sphere of influence in the past, and um, thanking them, starting off with a thank you, letting them know how they impacted me or what I learnt from them. So just as you said to me earlier, Vahin, thanks a lot. I'm learning about no and self-respect. Um, that often opens up the conversation, and people feel really pleased and they want to share more. So I often either through a WhatsApp message, as we're becoming quite informal, I think, these days with how we communicate across the business landscape. So it can be a LinkedIn message, it can be an email, but it actually can also be a WhatsApp message or WeChat or a text or a phone call. But I'll always start with, "Hey, so and so, I thought of you the other day because this came up, and I just wanted to thank you. You might not have realized this, but I learned a lot from this time where we XYZ worked on this project, or when I heard you deliver this talk, or I read your book," whatever it is, thanking them and telling them what you learnt from them, and then perhaps suggesting it would be great to be able to continue this conversation, or "I'd love to hear what you're up to," or "I hope you're well." So going with a mindset to give rather than to take. I think where people get networking wrong is we think, okay, I need to find someone who I can take advice from, who I can um, take coaching from, and who I can excel from. I want to learn from them. But if you see it as reciprocal, you end up learning from each other. It becomes quite a fulfilling relationship. It's not just one-sided. So um, knowing knowing that you enjoyed the self-respect and the no concept, Vahin, and talking about, well, the theory of enough is enough, and wealth and so on, knowing that we've read the same book, that's an example of a conversation that can happen in maybe 3 months from now. If you wanted to further network, I imagine the conversation could be something like, "Hi Jess, just read another one of Morgan Housel's books. Have you read it? Thought you might be interested in it." Or "I reread this chapter. It reminded me of the conversation we had. What do you think about this? I'd love your advice on this." So just giving something back to begin with is great. And then having a conversation. I don't think people need formal labels so much as mentor. I don't think networking events are actually that effective, official networking events. I think the networking happens every time you make contact with someone. They enter your network, and you can keep those relationships going.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that point of view that anybody can be part of your network. It can be, you may not think of them. Everybody thinks that, okay, this person is important in the world. Like I can be interviewing a YouTuber, and I did, Dr. Tom Crawford,
Right,
and yes, I could say that yes, he's added to my network, and I probably like to keep in touch
right.
with him. I'd like to keep in touch with you, Jess, and so I think the I think the mindset that should be instilled or influenced amongst people of today is that if the person is not if the person is just a general person, or maybe just like, okay, he's a student, or he's just at university or in high school, he can be added to your network. You don't have to say he can be a friend, and a friend can be considered part of your network. It's Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely.
and
Aunties, uncles, cousins, siblings,
exactly.
they make up your network.
Exactly, and like you said, I think the idea of a network, it's been the meaning has changed. If people think the meaning is
Yes.
different. A friend is not a part of your network, but it actually is. You talk to them all the time. You're learning from
And you
them.
know what? Those friends, absolutely, those friends will end up going on to perhaps study something great at university. They might have a business venture that really excites you. So those people that are beside you in the classroom now, they may become, the next Steve Jobs, or the next Elon Musk. You never know. You never know. And that could be you. And these people would benefit from being your friend too. So I really do believe in limitless potential in each of us. So, and I also believe in just karma. Treat others with kindness, and what goes around does come back around. So I think that's really important to send out positive energy, and it will reward you down the track.
I, I love that thinking. Yeah, and yes, I'm a big fan of karma. It is. I do believe in it. What goes around
Hmm.
comes around. So I can be ugly to people, and it will come back to me. Um,
Yes.
I, I I tend to think even on the positive, like even if I'm busy with something, like an example with podcasts, there's always that fear. Okay, what if this fails? And I'm like, okay,
Yes.
don't think in that perspective. Don't think in that perspective. And karma is a factor of that. Like this, your thinking patterns. If you think you are going to do bad in something, or you think you're going to fail in something,
Right.
you
It's
often
a
do because you've
self-fulfilling
already.
prophecy.
Yes, and it's the I think it's like the I don't know if you've read the books The Secret and so forth, or the by Rhonda Burns and so forth, or the it's a recommended read to all the listeners out there. It's an amazing book, and yeah, it's amazing books. There's more than one book at right now.
Mm.
There's even I think a documentary or film based on the book on Netflix. So definitely check that out. And
Thanks
now
for the
it's my
recommendation.
it's my pleasure. I think like speaking about books, we can go on the whole day. We can
I
probably compare
know,
what we've
right?
read.
I know. I know. Look at the,
It's
that's just a glimpse of the bookshelf. There's a lot more that goes across, but maybe for another session.
yes, definitely. And now my favorite part, we're going to start talking about Crimson.
Great.
When you said you started there when it was a startup, how was it? Like, was it? Did you?
Right.
What is it like? What is the vibe? I've always wanted to know what
Yes.
working in a
Oh my
startup
gosh.
was.
It was a high energy environment. Yeah, it felt like you were really within the engine room and building something really powerful. I was very lucky to work very close to the co-founders, Chandra Kushaw and Jamie Beaton, from day one. At the time, they were 18 years old. So that was really interesting. For the first time, I was actually being led by people quite significantly younger than me and working as an advisor and a consultant in many ways, but also learning from them as well. Their, what I call good hustle, their resilience, the competitive spirit, just that positive mindset. Um, they were fearless, and we set a lot of records when we were working in those early days. I was actually
Yes.
tasked. A funny story I can share is I think we had about I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 different at the time Skype calls before Zoom became popular in our pandemic world,
Yeah.
especially. But I think there was about 5 or 6 conversations that we had over Skype over a series of months. Um, it took about a year or so actually for me to say yes to join Crimson. At the time, I interviewed Jamie Beaton from his college dorm room at Harvard through Skype. I was interviewing him. Um, Jamie did very well with the Kumon program himself. And I was asked when I was at Kumon, I was asking Jamie about his experiences working through the program. He did a lot of other tutoring too, but Kumon was one where he completed, and I wanted to showcase where Kumon could get you, i.e., to Harvard in Jamie's case. While we were talking, the interview quickly turned to an interview of myself. Jamie was asking a lot of questions around my role and PR and marketing, and over time, I was then offered a role to work for the company he co-founded, and
Yeah.
I wasn't sure whether to take it seriously. Jamie was 18. This company was maybe a couple of years old at the time.
Yeah.
After about a year in 2016, I reached out. After I realized that the government environment wasn't for me, we started our conversation again. And
Mm.
I was then after my kind of semi-formal interview with Chandra, I was asked, "Hey, do you have a passport?" This is how the conversation was finished, wrapping up. I said, "Yeah, I do. How would you feel about getting on a flight tomorrow morning at like 5 a.m. So we can actually meet you and see how you enjoy this environment. And I think that was a great
Yeah.
test because I had to be adaptable, flexible, open-minded, willing to go with it. So I got my passport out, jumped on a flight the next morning. I think it was basically at the airport at 5 a.m. on a 7 a.m. flight, and I found myself basically working as on the day, um, without signing an employment contract or anything. I was basically giving advice, working in some ways as a PR representative. We were working with media that day, and I started representing Crimson before even saying officially yes to the job offer. And because I've never cared so much about uh, title and salary, I always believe if you do a good job, those things come. I was just
Yes.
doing a job that I thought I could do well. And then later we discussed and negotiated, well, what does the title look like? What's the
Yeah.
salary actually going to be here? But that was a
Yes.
good couple of weeks of the initial experiences at Crimson. And then I was able to fly to Sydney. So that was Auckland, New Zealand, and then spent some time in Sydney. Then I came back to Melbourne and I was trusted to launch our operations in Melbourne. I had to find a physical office, I had to find a team, and I had to set up our operations across Victoria and basically represent Crimson, um, all of brand PR marketing across ANZ. And in my first year, we actually launched into another 8 to 10 countries. So within a year, we were in about 10 markets, 12 markets at the time. So we became a global
Mm.
company very quickly. And I think when I came on board, there was about maybe 10 to 20 employees, and it just grew exponentially. Now, yeah, it's beyond comprehensible how
Mhm.
far it's grown. So I had to wear many different hats. I had to basically represent people and culture and HR in many ways, and establish the office and the practice there, and um, oversee the employment of a great team, and then still the brand and the PR and establishing certain programs with Jamie and Chandra, which like the Crimson Youth Fund and certain scholarships I'm really proud of that are still running. That was really rewarding. And then one of my greatest memories was traveling across our Asia offices, advising on PR and marketing. So that was Shanghai, um, Bangkok, and also Singapore. And I was also asked just before getting married, actually, to go and launch Crimson USA. So I was able to
Yes.
spend time in San Francisco with some great colleagues of mine, and we launched our Crimson US operations. While in the US, I was able to secure some great coverage in Forbes magazine and just do some networking across the US community. Funny
Yes.
story is, though, because my accent is an Australian one and pretty hard to understand sometimes, I found myself, just pretending to have an American accent on certain business calls while over in the US because how else could people understand me? So some funny lessons in adapting. But yeah, it was a real thrill. What keeps me getting up excited every day is the diversity of people, of opinions, of thought, of projects, and the
Hmm.
fast-paced environment. I get a little impatient if I feel that things are stalling or if we could move
Yes.
faster, but we're not. Crimson isn't at all conservative. Um, it's very bullish and very bold, and it's just the thinking is
Hmm.
just try it, fail quickly. Better to make a mistake than you know paralysis by analysis. So yeah, it's
Yes.
been it's been a phenomenal environment, and I've thrived in it, and yeah, get to celebrate 6 years in a week or so.
Before we continue with this podcast episode, I would like to thank our sponsor, the Crimson Youth Fund. Now, the Crimson Youth Fund is for individuals that have started a project while in high school that can benefit fellow students and make a lasting impact on their community. Or it's for individuals that have a great idea but does not have the essential resources like a branding kit or an event plan or media interest to make it happen. The Crimson Youth Fund is a philanthropic arm of the Crimson Education, created to provide students or recent graduates aged 13 to 21 years old with essential resources like bringing the event to or project to life. For more information on the Crimson Youth Fund, please check out the link in the show notes, and maybe they could just be supporting you on your next project.
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, I'll wish you in advance. Congratulations to 6 years.
Thank you.
But I think from hearing your view about like my position and so forth. I think like Napoleon Hill's quote that resonates with me quite personally and so forth. But the man who does, or the woman that does more than she or he is paid for, it will soon be paid for more than he or she does. And
Absolutely.
that quote does that quote, it's like he already knew from Napoleon Hill, is like now back, I don't know how many years, but yeah, it's a long way back. But he already understood that finding your passion already in your job is more important than you thinking of the monetary value that position has and so forth. And I think I also that resonates with me. And I've recently learned in A-level English about the theories of language and so forth. But you going to the US and opening and being there, like the Australian accent, there's actually something called cultural transmission theory and substratum theory. So I think I'm applying some knowledge here, but it's amazing to see some like real life application
Right.
of like English
Exactly.
English change and so forth. But I totally understand your point of view when you say that language in the US is a little bit like the language change is a little bit difficult. Like I remember when I was there, the first time I was there, so by myself, I remember
Mhm.
calling a margarita pizza, asking for margarita pizza, and the person was like, "It's not a margarita," and like, they had this like husky voice. I'm like, "It's not margarita pizza. It's a cheese pizza. Say it properly." And I was like, "Okay, I'm sorry. It's a cheese pizza." And the second time I visited the US, I was like, "Mom, Dad, it is a cheese pizza. Don't say margarita. Don't say margarita." And like literally, it was something that just sticks with me till now, because I remember getting shouted quite harshly there. I was like,
Wow.
damn, these very picky about their pizza names.
Mm,
I was like,
mm.
okay, oh, whatever
Right.
it is, it's
Yeah,
good
for
to
me,
learn.
right. I always feel that, um, yeah, it is good to learn, and I think if you are the person going into um, the environment, the different environment, I always try to show respect by adopting the ways or the language or euphemisms and so
Mm,
on, and I have fun with that too. So, um, yeah, I think I learned pretty quickly to just well, either changing my tone or my accent a little bit, or slowing down
mm,
the pace that I talk at. For example, in when I was presenting in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, I was at a round table with a representative from
mm,
Vietnam, India, Singapore, um, Japan. There were executives from Japan at the time, and so on. This was when working for Kumon as the representative of ANZ, Australia, New Zealand, and I realized that culturally, what would be really respectful and appropriate is if I slowed down, I talked slowly. I also gave a copy of my slide
mm,
deck, my presentation in advance, and I didn't put
mm,
anyone on the spot because that can cause great shame and embarrassment. I also
mm,
didn't I also didn't challenge directly decisions of authority either. That I showed respect for, and an open mind for, and found another way to push back on certain decisions that were made from authority. Because I know culturally, people in some countries, do need to feel prepared, do want the chance to have a script and slides ready. Um, Whereas in other countries, the philosophy or the teaching within school is everybody can participate, and we encourage you to challenge back, actually.
mm,
And it's on you to prove why you're right. Everyone else, feel free to prove why this person is wrong. Um,
mm,
it's very different country by country. So yeah, I've definitely learnt some different skills to make everyone comfortable with the end goal, the ultimate goal for me is having diversity of contribution and thought. So you can really hear from everyone's perspective, and people don't feel intimidated or not welcome to share their take.
It's so great to hear that from your experience, and you've worked in the US and so forth. You have like a diverse working experience through the world, and you understand cultures and so forth.
Mm.
And this is like just a little bit of like, I don't know if you've experienced imposter syndrome, like when you started this whole traveling type of thing, because like working in your country, or Australia, it's,
Mm.
the people speak the same as
Right.
you. It's just like so easy to like go on. It's like the lingo is there, but when you go
Mm-hmm.
overseas or you work in, let's just say Singapore, for example, like when I was there, there is like a little bit of like an accent change there, which is, should I say, that you don't want to offend somebody, like, or be disrespectful. So you always
Mm-mm.
try to like, okay, am I saying this right? That I'm not
Right.
saying it incorrectly, that they
And
misunderstand me.
yeah, right. Yeah, I think it's great to be vulnerable and honest. So,
Yeah.
in the past, I've said to someone, um, I'm going to do my best here to pronounce your name. It might sound different given I'm coming from an Australian accent here. Is this
Yes.
correct? Can would you feel welcome to correct me? Have I got this right? And just showing that you're attempting to pronounce properly. I think showing that effort and care and
Mm.
consideration is far more appreciated than any offense caused from perhaps saying it a little wrong. I think the effort goes a long way. Um, One tip I have with dealing with imposter syndrome, for me, I often, yeah, I think of it quite playfully. In the workplace, I find what we do almost in some ways as role playing. It's not truly who you
Mhm.
are. People see a very narrow glimpse and you play a role. It's often in my case, I would walk in with a suit. I don't walk around the house normally in a like high powered suit and heels and
Yeah.
and so on. And I don't carry a briefcase around when I'm talking to my family members and so on at the dinner table. So I'd almost laugh at myself going into it, not taking myself too seriously and thinking I'm just going to have fun with this. If people respect it and truly feel that I have a good contribution to make here, great. I'll keep contributing and offering my opinion and advice. If I'm not taken seriously or if I'm seen as less than, then my work is done here. What else can I do? I tried, but it's not going to actually affect my confidence because they only see a very small glimpse of who I am, very surface
Yes.
level, but also knowing that people take their own biases, their own life experiences, and project that onto how they
Mm.
interpret you. And you can't affect that.
Yeah.
So I always say to people who are worrying about, is someone going to read me this way or am I going to come off as this? I just say to them, you can only control your response, how you respond to things and how you perceive things. You can never truly influence how someone responds to you. So just think about manage your response, be positive, be kind to yourself, have fun with it, and understand at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I think in society, we're all just role playing here and making it up as we go along.
Yes, and I like that. I like that analogy, especially like when you've related back to like when you were in your childhood and so forth. That people pleasing was something that used to
Right.
be. I think everybody at one stage they like want to people
Mm.
please, and
Mm-hmm.
imposter, and this hearing your advice about imposter syndrome, it's fine to make mistakes. That's what I'm learning right now. It's fine to make mistakes.
Yes.
It's fine not to be a people pleaser. I actually had a tweet about that. I was like, if I wanted to sell if I wanted to be everybody's favorite person, or I'm paraphrasing in yeah, now I'm even getting it
Mm-hmm.
wrong, although if I wanted to
Mm.
please everybody, I would sell ice cream. And then I with a comment from my English teacher. She says even people that don't like ice cream, like they don't like the ice cream man.
That's
So I was
right.
like,
There's some people
through,
that will still be offended by being sold ice cream. So,
yeah, and
yeah, yeah.
And that's like such a fundamental thing that we have to instill in our mindsets, that you're not
Yeah.
going to please everybody. Not
No.
everybody's going to like you. They're not going to
Yeah.
like you because you may have done something better than them, and it's
Right.
fine. You being better than somebody and you not even being aware about it, hey, it's like a
Right.
point up. Like, it's who
Exactly.
it's
Um,
for you,
I
it's you
wonder,
growing.
right, that's right.
Yeah.
It's growth makes you uncomfortable, growth makes people around you uncomfortable. You enter into an unfamiliar territory, and it makes people change, and change is never easy, and it's
Mm,
as you know, the only constant, I believe the only constant in life is change. And I think that's
mm,
why I'm quite comfortable and at ease with myself changing, my lifestyle changing, my role at Crimson changing. And I love change. For me, change, it's going on another adventure. It's like a choose your own adventure book where you can just keep rewriting the next chapter and the next chapter. I find that very exciting. If someone said to me, I can guarantee you now, this is going to be your job for the next 6 years, you're going to live here for the next 10 years, I don't
mm.
think I'd be too pleased with that at all. That would that wouldn't be too fun for me. I do like yeah, I do like the unknowns. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that just speaks about, like, okay, you spoke about change and so forth and growth, positive growth, like your journey that you and your experiences that you've gone through is all positive, like the looks of it, and
Mm,
by bystanders' view, it looks amazing, and you've
mm,
grown with all the experiences. And I just like to take this opportunity to, like, ask you, like, is many people, like, think that university is your be it end it all. Like, you often get these people in the world, like, oh, if you don't have a degree, and
mm,
I've been talking to a few people on the podcast, like, they like tell me straight that if you don't, they're not going to go to university. And
mm,
it's they've actually, like, opened my mind. I personally want to go to university, so
mm-hmm,
it's my objective. I actually enjoy studying for some odd reason, and I thank my parents for that. They've been the
mm,
influence on me like that. But
yeah.
those people who, and then maybe you can elaborate, but from your experience through traveling and speaking to a diverse range of people, um, is the is it necessary for you to go to university to be somebody, uh, should I say, qualified in your field, like to be
Mm,
known as qualified or expert in your field? Is there?
right. Mm.
Yeah.
That's a Yeah, you can approach that in a range of ways. I think it does come back to what are your ambitions and your goals ultimately. And in some
Mm,
cases, a university degree is required if you want to be recognized as, say, a surgeon
mm,
or an anesthetist, or
yeah.
if you want to um, move into consulting and so on. Not only is university actually a prerequisite and a requirement, but even, I'm at Crimson Education, we exist because we understand that in many ways, a university degree and a top ranked university does open doors and sets you on a path um, to access very competitive industries and jobs and so on. But it's not just about that. It's not about the CV in itself. I think for a lot of people, a university provides maybe the community that they didn't have during high school or earlier years.
Yes.
They find their tribe, their people, and there's so many extracurricular groups and clubs, and so many cultural factors to weigh up when you're choosing your university as well. But it always comes back to, yeah, the student's personality, their goals, their ambitions. It depends. There might be a career path for you where you actually don't need that qualification. It helps, or it might add credibility when you are introducing yourself to certain other professionals or whatever. But it depends on, yeah, what you value and what's important to you at the end of the day. My parents, I'm a first generation university student. They
Mm,
actually didn't have the chance to go to university and have still done very well for themselves in other ways. So it just
Mm.
depends on your values and um, yeah, where you see yourself really adding value and contributing and being part of different aspects of
No,
community.
I like that. Again, I like that point of view. Um, as working at Crimson and so forth, you've understood the university industry, you've
Yes,
understood
yeah,
the education industry, and you've always been into education from your
always.
experiences. And I think that stems down, and you can probably correct me, but it stems down to that point where you were assigned to helping those students. Like it started there. It's like it's just
I
like a
think so.
glimpse. Like you didn't even know, and it's so funny to think that life plays
Yes.
out and like you're getting these discrete views and you don't even realize that you're getting these discrete views. Um, but I think like from your perspective in the education industry, what is your view around university? My personal view around university, it's necessary. I've always thought
Hmm.
of university as like, oh, okay, it's a really cool thing.
Hmm.
Education is the power.
Mm.
And I've heard people that say otherwise. What is your
Hmm.
view?
Right. I think we have heard from some global, celebrities and that have glamorized dropping out of college. I dropped out and I've still founded this multi-billion-dollar company. Look at
Yeah.
me. But in most cases, and how the world is structured, the selection process, university plays a really great part of signaling actually in that. Jamie, he's going to be releasing his first ever book called Accepted, and
Mm,
in this accepted book, there's a whole chapter on signaling, and signaling starts pretty early on. And actually, it's the reality, I think, of the society we live in today. The university you go to, the kind of grades you maintain, the clubs that you're a part of, and the roles you play within university, that role playing part gives a signal. Um, that allows then the
mm,
graduate programs or your first year out, the companies that are looking for talent, um, they can easily follow the signals that their current cohort of employees have. For example, at a consulting firm like McKinsey, which is world famous, McKinsey may look at their top performers within their firm and see the common denominators there. We have employees, our top performers typically, came from an Ivy
mm,
League. They maintained this certain GPA average grade.
mm,
They played this role at the student newspaper and so on. We don't have time to screen the hundreds of thousands of applicants we get every year. So they may then simply choose to follow the same signals. Let's go to these particular universities. We'll choose people that have this um, general grade average and that have taken on these kinds of roles because we know this is the kind of candidate that thrives in our company. So yeah, that
mm.
that signaling tends to happen, and that's something just to be aware of. So I do think university is important to be recognized by certain industries, professions, um, depending on where you want to go. And I also think studying abroad is an incredible life experience that I never had the chance to do. But for my own daughter, I would definitely think about encouraging her to have the opportunity to study abroad. I think um, being a global citizen is going to be a skill that our future generations really need. I think the world
Mm,
is getting smaller and more interconnected than ever. So, studying in
mm.
another environment, another cultural hub, being exposed to an international student body, I think that would be a very exciting place to thrive in. So, that's um, that's my view of the world, and that also just gave me a lot of confidence knowing that I had a degree and I was in some ways certified to give this advice and to be an expert
Yeah.
in this field that I thought I was an expert in.
Yeah, I think that the idea that the ideology of university, and when you finally get that piece of should I
Yes,
say
in the
cardboard
background
or
there.
paper, well, like
Yeah.
it holds significant value. Yeah, and I agree. Like having all those frames on your wall, like okay, University of Cambridge or University of Oxford, or whatever it is on your wall, it's like well, I did it. It's like an
Yeah.
achievement, and I think it all bases on people's viewpoint, like you said.
Mm,
Every person is different. Not
yeah.
every person is cut out for academia. Not every person
Hmm.
wants to go to university. Maybe they found their purpose in life. It's not to go to university. It's maybe to develop some apps or
Absolutely. Yeah,
something like that.
absolutely. To build a legacy and to develop, and there's so much value you can add without going to university. Um, but yeah, that seems to be the path that I followed, and I see so much value from what the students at Crimson experience when they do
Mm,
gain admission to that university. Like their world just opens up, and the opportunities just explode when they're on a campus that's the right fit for them. That's another thing. I
yeah.
would never prescribe. I would never say, for you to um, get the most out of university, it has to be these universities or these are the best
Yes.
universities. I think it
Yeah.
really matters. What is the student's personality? What environment would they thrive in? What's the culture of the campus of this university? What are the professors like? And what do they specialize in? What intellectual discussions happen on campus? What clubs are around there? What have the alumni gone on to achieve? And what's the legacy?
Mm,
There's so many factors to consider and weigh out. It's so exciting when you do have the option to consider your target list of universities that would be a good fit for you. And some universities may be considered obscure, but they are top in the world at architecture or top in the world for journalism. So thinking,
mm.
outside the box as well when you think about university is a great learning experience, even if you don't in the end up going for it
Yeah.
and applying or getting accepted.
Yes. No, to wrap it up now, I think like I've this has been going on for like hour and a half now, I think. So I really enjoyed. We can speak for hours, but I think right now, I just one thing I would like to know is that
Hmm.
uh, as Crimson Youth Fund director, and how
Hmm.
was the idea yours? Did you build it up and so forth? How did it actually come around? How did you pitch this idea?
Right. Yes, this was in conversation with Jamie. It's taking me back quite some time now, at least 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. I'm trying to think of what happened was from memory. I mean, Jamie still provides strategy and mentorship to students, so he's exposed to students' extracurricular projects all the time and initiatives. Myself, I was exposed in my role of interviewing students and telling their story, securing really great media coverage of their results, what their goals and dreams were. I came across the fact that there were so many activities and projects that they had ideas for, but they just didn't have
Mm,
either the confidence to go for it, the symbolic backing, or even the just practically speaking, the funds to get it off
mm,
the ground. So I remember at the time thinking developing a philanthropic arm for Crimson would be a great contribution back as we were able to continue to grow. Um, we were very fortunate to raise quite a lot of funding over time. So we thought, why not channel that back and reinvest back into our students? And also any student, really. You don't have to be a Crimson student. It's for any student out there, 13 to 21, to apply to the Crimson Youth Fund. So we said, let's dedicate $50,000 to this fund, and over time, let's back as many high potential students as we can. And
mm.
that's through initiatives that other students will be exposed to, just to broaden their own thinking, their development, their contribution back to the community. So I would say it was very much just a conversation that started. Um, I don't think I had to try too hard to convince or to pitch or to secure approval in the end. Once
Mhm.
we reviewed a couple of applicants, it was pretty clear how amazing this generation of students is. I'm blown away just seeing this podcast come to fruition from when it was mentioned as an idea in a spreadsheet that I read
Yeah.
from our applications to this. It's just phenomenal. So yeah, we're just constantly blown away by seeing how through all these Crimson Youth Fund initiatives, people are becoming more connected. Um, that's a theme that we're seeing more than ever. A lot of socially minded initiatives, a lot of initiatives that are focused on personal growth, mental health, and togetherness during such a challenging time of the pandemic. That's been so rewarding to see. I could never have imagined that when we first started. Yeah.
Hmm. No, that's really great. And just one final question, and this amazes my curiosity probably. But how does the I know that you've I think you host the Crimson Fireside Chats.
Yes.
Uh, how does that tie in with the Crimson Youth Fund? Is it how does that work?
Right, right. It's actually considered quite separate. That's
Okay.
another initiative, yeah, that I lead. This one is more so from my role within people and performance, the people and performance team
Yes.
at Crimson. What we recognized was in the thick of the pandemic, our team members really wanted to get a sense of, again, social connectivity, while also
Yes.
giving them an opportunity to keep developing their skills, their mindset. And one thing at Crimson we saw is because we were moving a million miles an hour, because we are um, constantly driving forward, there wasn't often permission to pause and to reflect, and to also
Mm,
hear from others that have done it before, either as entrepreneurs, um, or MBA graduates, or female executives, women on the executive team, etc. So we wanted to get these
mm,
voices across for our team to hear from, to give them ideas of where they can further develop and grow, what we can do better at Crimson, where they might want to take their career to the next level, but also to just discuss um, basic, everyday matters. So I launched the Fireside Chats, and I started interviewing top global business thinkers in high performance environments. So people that
mm,
had gone on and won an Olympic gold medal, people that had graduated from Harvard Business School and are at other global companies, or worked within Silicon Valley, in massive, venture capital firms and so on. Eastern philosophy, Western philosophy, all kinds of perspectives, and we would bring them onto um, into a fireside chat, a live virtual webinar. And in some cases, we'd have 80 people joining live from around the world. In other cases, it would be a
mm,
more intimate session. But yeah, I would host them, or my really great colleagues would put their hand up to host as well. So we've had brilliant hosts from the UAE region, from New Zealand, from the US, and so on. And
mm.
yeah, a lot of questions come up around imposter syndrome, or around networking, mentorship, all those questions you
Yeah.
asked today, very common themes, or around career progression and promotions, um, how to be entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial within your own company, um,
Yes.
how to take a customer empathy approach to developing tech and products. So many different questions, but we find it really rewarding, and it's a solid hour that we give back to our team to take
Okay.
as much away from it as they can.
Okay, that sounds really great. Yeah, speaking to all these influential people, like um, I'm speaking to a few right now, yourself included, Jessica. It's been great chatting to you today. Now, to our traditional end of or conclusion
Yes,
of the Expandable Mind is the rapid fire questions. So you can
great.
answer them in
Fire away.
points, sentences. Yeah, I'm going to fire away. Let's do this.
Let's go.
Tell me about the three most influential people in your life and how they've impacted you.
Oh, that's so hard. I would have to say my sister, my big sister, my husband, and my baby, my little girl. How have they impacted and influenced me? My big sister, she's, how we spoke earlier about actions over words, just her actions,
Yeah.
always being very kind and generous, and
Mm,
to those around her and myself. And I think I saw how diligent she was, how studious, very academic, that really influenced me to take a similar
Mm.
approach to my work ethic, my studies, and just her loyalty to her friends and family. I respect so much, and I've always tried to emulate that myself. So that's one.
Mm.
My husband, um, he's influenced me in so many ways. I think one main way has been just maintaining a really positive outlook on life. He is the most positive person I've ever met, very practical, and just,
Yes.
you know, we've suffered from a lot of loss in recent years, family, friends, and so on. And he's just gets back up with so much determination. So I really value that. And at times when I've confided in him, saying, I don't know if I can keep doing this role, or this is getting really hard, or I'm exhausted. He just always reminds me
Mm.
to think long term and to think sustainably and keep putting energy back into myself for the long term. He always wants to, reminds me that
Mm.
life's a marathon, not a sprint, when I get a bit ahead of myself
Yeah.
sometimes. So that's great. And then my daughter, Abigail, my little girl, she influences me so much because you just want to be a good person for them. You want to be a good example. And, I really enjoy telling her that mummy's going to work today in the city, or
Yeah.
mummy's calling auntie so and so. One of my best friends from childhood is now, her auntie. And I want to show her the value of hard work, of maintaining friendships and solid relationships. And I think the importance of play as well. So she reminds me to just play for the sake of play and enjoy, just
Yeah.
being silly and having fun, not taking life too seriously. So that's what I love about her. So they're the three. If I
Yeah.
had to narrow it down to three, there's so many more people though. I can't name.
And next question would be, if you could go back and give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Okay, my 18-year-old self, just starting university, I would tell myself to, I would say, have have more conversations with people in your community. That's the advice I'd give to myself. I think that I limited myself
Mm.
to thinking networking was something that happened in my second year of uni, or maybe the final year when you prepare yourself for the official workforce. Apart from the casual job I had during uni, like many of us have, I reserved networking for that. If I could go back now and say, yeah,
Yes.
well, as we spoke about today, um, have conversations, um, be interested in, show that you're interested in other people, and um, just, yeah, I think embrace the unknown a little more, get comfortable with the unknown. That would be my advice to my
Mm.
younger self.
Yeah, I like that. If you could have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, I don't know which one is your preference,
Cup of tea.
with an historical tea,
Mm.
historical figure, who would you choose?
Oh gosh, I'd have to say, can historical also be someone still living but influential in
Yeah.
in history? I would say David Attenborough is one. Yeah, David
Okay.
Attenborough would be a big one for me. I even though he is still with us, I think just the changing world that he's experienced socially, environmentally, culturally, that would be a
Mm.
phenomenal conversation to have, and it would definitely be a cup of tea. I think he'd probably have a cup of tea over a coffee, and coffee just makes me too wired. I honestly physically get the shakes, and I'm high strung, and I just know that my body doesn't receive coffee all that well. I've learnt to just not try to do the coffee thing, even though that's what a lot of adults do. I'm okay with admitting that tea is tea is the thing that I enjoy more. So that would be a cup of tea with him. Yes.
Yeah, I like that. Um, what do you think is the most important lessons you've learned over your career?
That's a great one. Important lessons. One would be active listening. So don't
Mm.
don't fixate too
Yeah.
much on having the right answer and being the first to have the right answer. Just listen intently and
Mm.
carefully, and I think you'll learn more truths along the way, and also see opportunities that
Mm.
others may not see as well. Um, it also helps you to read the room and to get a sense of how to get the most out of people and collaborate really well if you're listening, and also listening to the body language or watching the body language, not just what people are saying, but really listen or
Mm.
observe what the actions are as well. Uh, that's that's
Mm.
one lesson that I have. Another lesson would be to um, to to I guess be okay with having an empathetic approach to leadership. So, being a woman in leadership, people might perceive my empathetic approach as being, what some might say is soft, or a little too easy on some
Mm.
people. But I think actually what I'm proud of is balancing empathy with still high standards, and empathy
Mm.
with high expectations of people. But you can have those high standards and high expectations, I think, when you're in the trenches with the team and when you're leading from the front with them. So, taking those two approaches, I think, creates a really productive, um, energized, safe environment for the team where they feel that you see them, you hear them, you've got their back, but you're also going to expect a lot from them and push them uh, to be a little bit uncomfortable. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
I think that's what I would pass on, as well as another lesson that I've gained.
I like that. Um, Last question, the finale, whatever you want to call the lost. What's your favorite productivity hack?
Ooh, for me, it is always the night before the next day, reviewing the schedule that you've set for yourself and seeing the day as a schedule. I physically, as a form of signaling, I physically allocate windows in my calendar for different projects and work or study. So I block it out rather than writing a list where you don't really know what time can be allocated to that list. It's almost quite, I think, challenging to have a list and you think, great, I've got this list. How do I actually accomplish that? Where's the time to accomplish that? And what I love doing is every day for weeks in advance, putting hours, half hours aside to do projects and work, and always reviewing it the night before, knowing what I'm stepping into the next day. So I'm prepared. I've got the mindset ready to go when I wake up in the morning. Um, and then also varying, I'm more productive in some projects in 20-minute blocks. I think our focus and
Yeah.
attention works more so in 20-minute blocks. So rather than having every meeting a standard hour-long meeting, make it a 20-minute
Yeah.
meeting and you'll get through as much content as you would otherwise in an hour. You'll just not waffle as much. Um, and then blocking out maybe more longer blocks, like 2 hours, if you're in the flow and you know that that's a piece of work that you need to really dive into and lose yourself in a little bit more. So, yeah,
Yeah.
just find out what those flows are. And also, productivity hack number three, um, figure out your energy waves. Are you higher productivity in the morning? Do you find you have a second wind after 8 p.m.? Do you actually need to go to bed at 8 p.m. because you're better at 5 a.m.? So figure out where you work,
Mm.
where your brain is most sharp, and give yourself those challenging, decision making tasks or meaty projects when you have the most energy in your day. And everyone has a different flow.
Hmm. I actually like when you were speaking about like actually planning your reading over the plan for the day, the next day. It reminded me of a model that I read recently. It's called the pilot and the plane, where the pilot when you're planning, and it's separate people like productivity gurus and all of that agree that separating planning and doing will actually increase your productivity. I might be paraphrasing
Mm-mm.
again, but that whole pilot and plane model is, I read in a newsletter, and it actually relates so much uh, to your how you plan your day. And I think I've been recently thinking, before I actually sit down to do any work, I like, okay, let me plan. I'm going to be the pilot, where I'm going to plan the whole thing, and I'm going to instruct myself, okay, be very specific on what I want to do
Right.
at what time, at like studying and so forth. Like that's just an example. I can do quite long blocks of time, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, when is enough? And we spoke about that earlier,
Hmm.
but I plan be the pilot for at least like maybe 10 minutes, and I try get down my key things that I want to get completed.
Yes.
And then I jump into the plane, and this is probably because I have been stuck in South Africa for a very long time. I have been we haven't been traveling quite a bit, so I think this model quite I really like it quite a bit because of the analogy and the relation. But I jump into the plane, and because the pilot's already had its instructions, he's preset the whole thing.
Exactly.
I just jump
Autopilot
into the
after
plane
that.
and
Yeah.
autopilot, and I'm following the to-do list or whatever list it is. And
Yep.
yeah, I think that's brilliant, and maybe more people can get it out there. So yeah, and that comes to the end of the podcast
Great.
episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much,
It's a
Jessica. And
pleasure.
as usual, um, thank you for your insight. It's been really inspirational, thoughtful, insightful, as I mentioned previously. Um, but thank you so much for your time. And yeah, we hope to have you again on the podcast.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Vaheen. It's been an absolute pleasure. I learnt just as much from you. So thank you for spending time and thank you for listening to those out there. All the best. Wishing you the best of luck for the year ahead.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for being on the Expandable Mind podcast. To our listeners out there, thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a 5-star rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at expandable_mind. Thanks again. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.